The Traveller Series, Episode 2, The Awakening. Prologue. The eternal darkness of Echo. Echo drifted through the endless void of space, a being of pure dark matter. He was once a powerful entity on the distant planet of Vanadim, a world now lost to time and destruction. In the aftermath of the cataclysm that had consumed his home, Echo had been torn from his physical form, reduced to a spectral essence, cursed to wander the cold expanse of the universe. For centuries, Echo floated aimlessly, consumed by bitterness and dark thoughts. His memories of Vanadim had faded into a fog of forgotten dreams, yet one thought remained clear. Earth. It was a distant world he had once learned about, a planet in the Milky Way galaxy inhabited by pure humans, a species of diverse cultures and boundless potential. Earth represented everything Echo had lost, everything he longed to regain. But Echo was trapped, confined to the darkness, powerless to reach Earth or influence its destiny. He knew of Earth only from the knowledge he had while in his physical form, but that knowledge was limited. He had no physical body, no senses, no way to navigate through the vastness of space. All he could do was float, seething with anger, frustration, and a growing desire for power. As the centuries passed, Echo's thoughts grew darker. He imagined the power he could wield if he could somehow find a way to Earth, to be reborn among the humans and use their world to exact his vengeance, to reclaim what he had lost. But with each passing century, the hope of escape seemed to fade, leaving only the bitterness of his isolation. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. Chapter 1. Senator Rodney Charles, Washington, D.C., 1990. A city humming with the energy of political ambition and power. At the heart of it all was Senator Rodney Charles, a Republican representing the state of Texas. Rodney was a man of principles, known for his unwavering moral stance and his commitment to his constituents. His speeches on the Senate floor often echoed his deep religious convictions, earning him respect and admiration from colleagues and voters alike. Rodney's life seemed perfect on the surface. He was married to Cynthia, a woman of grace, beauty, and shared values. Together, they were a formidable couple in Washington, often seen as the epitome of success and virtue. But beneath the polished exterior lay a sorrow that had cast a shadow over their lives for years. They were childless. Cynthia had always dreamed of being a mother, and for years the couple had tried everything science of the day had to offer, and even adoption. All had failed. The loss of their adopted son to leukemia had been a devastating blow, one that Cynthia struggled to recover from. Although they continued to put on a brave face, the grief lingered, an unspoken ache in their hearts. Despite their private pain, life continued, and the demands of political life kept Rodney occupied. He spent his days in the Senate, advocating for policies that reflected his strong moral beliefs. His closest ally in the Senate was Senator Joseph Flanagan of South Carolina, another man of deep religious conviction. Together, they championed conservative causes, from pro-life legislation to school prayer. But like all politicians, Rodney had his secrets. The world of Washington politics was complex, a web of alliances and deals that often required compromise. While Rodney prided himself on his integrity, he knew that to survive and succeed in Washington, he sometimes had to make concessions that weighed heavily on his conscience. It was 7 a.m. in the morning. The air outside was cool, with a hint of the approaching winter, and the sunlight streamed through the large windows of the Rodney home, casting a warm glow across the kitchen. Senator Rodney sat at the breakfast table, flipping through a thick stack of briefing papers, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was a man in his mid-40s, with a square jaw, greying hair at the temples, and an air of confidence that had served him well in the political arena. His wife, Cynthia, moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast. She was a graceful woman, a few years younger than Rodney, with soft auburn hair and a calm, composed demeanour. She placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him, her movements automatic, as if her mind were elsewhere. Rodney looked up, noticing the faraway expression on her face. "Cynthia?" he called gently, but she didn't respond. Cynthia was lost in her thoughts, her mind drifting back to memories of their son, Mark. He had been just 8 years old when leukemia had taken him from them, and the pain of his loss still lingered, a dull ache in her chest that never fully went away. She could see him so clearly in her mind, his bright smile, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his favourite comic book heroes, and how he used to sit at this very table, swinging his legs back and forth as he ate his breakfast. "Mommy, can I have more syrup on my pancakes?" Mark's voice echoed in her mind, so vivid that for a moment she could almost believe he was still there. Cynthia blinked, her eyes welling up with tears. How she missed those mornings, the sound of his laughter filling the house, the way he would wrap his small arms around her in a tight hug before running off to catch the school bus. The house felt so empty without him, and the silence was a constant reminder of what they had lost. "Cynthia!" Rodney's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She looked up, startled, and quickly wiped at her eyes. "I'm sorry, Rodney. What did you say?" He reached across the table, gently squeezing her hand. "I was asking if you were all right. You seemed a million miles away." Cynthia forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine. Just thinking about Mark." Rodney nodded, his expression softening with understanding. "I miss him too," he said quietly. "But we have to keep moving forward, Cynthia. It's what he would have wanted." "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just hard sometimes." Rodney squeezed her hand again, offering her a reassuring smile. "We'll get through this together. We always do." Cynthia nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She appreciated his strength, the way he always seemed to know the right thing to say. But there were moments when she felt so alone in her grief. Mark had been their whole world, and now that he was gone, she didn't know how to fill the emptiness he had left behind. Rodney glanced at his watch, then stood up, gathering his papers. "I'm running late for the office. There's a committee meeting this morning that I can't miss." Cynthia stood as well, offering him a soft kiss on the cheek. "Take care of yourself, Rodney. Don't work too hard." "I'll try," he replied with a chuckle. "I'll see you tonight." With that, Rodney grabbed his briefcase and headed out the door, leaving Cynthia alone in the quiet house. She watched him go, her heart heavy with a mix of love and sadness. She wished she could be as strong as he was, but the pain of losing Mark was still so fresh, so overwhelming. At the office, professional boundaries. The Senate offices in Washington, D.C. were bustling with activity as Senator Rodney arrived, briefcase in hand, ready for another day of political maneuvering. The atmosphere was one of controlled chaos, with aides and staffers moving swiftly through the halls, carrying documents and exchanging urgent whispers. Rodney walked with purpose, his mind already focused on the day ahead. When he reached his office, Betty Harper was already there, typing away at her desk. Betty was in her early 30s, with striking features and a sharp mind that had quickly earned her a place of respect in Rodney's office. She was efficient, reliable, and always seemed to know exactly what needed to be done. "Good morning, Senator," Betty greeted him with a warm smile as he walked in. "Good morning, Betty," Rodney replied, returning the smile. "Anything pressing on the agenda today?" "Just the usual," Betty said, handing him a folder. "The committee meeting at 9, followed by a lunch with some key donors. I've already confirmed your appointments." Rodney took the folder and flipped through it, nodding in approval. "You're always on top of things, Betty. I don't know what I'd do without you." Betty's smile widened slightly. "Just doing my job, Senator. But I appreciate the compliment." There was an easy camaraderie between them, a mutual respect that had developed over the years they had worked together. Rodney valued Betty's insights and often sought her opinion on matters related to his work. She was more than just a secretary. She was someone he could trust, someone who understood the pressures of his position. As they discussed the day's schedule, there was a subtle undercurrent of something more, an unspoken connection that both were aware of but neither acknowledged. It was a professional relationship, but there was a warmth between them that went beyond the usual boundaries of boss and employee. Betty noticed the slight tension in his shoulders and the way his eyes occasionally drifted to the family photo on his desk. The one of him, Cynthia, and Mark. "Is everything all right, Senator?" she asked gently. Rodney looked up, slightly startled by the question. "Yes, just a lot on my mind. It's been a tough few months, but I'm managing." Betty nodded, her expression understanding. "If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." "Thank you, Betty. I appreciate that," Rodney replied, his tone sincere. He paused for a moment, then added, "You've been a great support these past few months. I don't think I've said that enough." Betty looked at him, her eyes softening. "You're welcome, Senator. It's what I'm here for." Rodney felt a small but undeniable pull, an urge to say something more, something personal, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. This wasn't the time, and Betty was his secretary, nothing more. He couldn't afford to let his mind wander down that path. "All right, let's get to work," Rodney said, shifting back to his professional tone. "We've got a busy day ahead." Betty nodded and returned to her desk, though the warmth in her eyes lingered. As Rodney dove into his work, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. Something subtle, but significant. But for now, he focused on the task at hand, pushing aside the distractions of his personal life. There was work to be done, and he was determined to keep everything in order, both in his office and in his heart. Chapter 2. Cynthia's Journey to Nigeria. As the weeks passed, Cynthia's thoughts remained heavy with the loss of her son, Mark. The days seemed to blend into one another, each one marked by the same quiet routine. She tried to stay busy, organizing charity events, managing the household, and supporting Rodney in his political endeavors. But nothing could fill the void left by Mark's death. The turning point in Cynthia's life came during a Republican convention held in California. The event was a gathering of the party's elite, a chance for senators, congressmen, and their spouses to mingle with donors and strategize for the upcoming elections. As always, Cynthia was by her husband's side, smiling and engaging with the guests. But her heart wasn't in it. It was during this event that Cynthia met Sade, also called Iya Ibeji, meaning mother of twins, the wife of Senator Flanagan. Sade was a Nigerian-American woman with a warm and compassionate demeanor. The two women had met before, but had never had the opportunity for a deeper conversation. That night, something in Sade's eyes told Cynthia that she could confide in her. As they sat together, away from the hustle and bustle of the convention, Sade gently brought up the topic of children. "I heard about your son," Sade said softly, her hand resting on Cynthia's arm. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't imagine the pain you must have gone through." Cynthia's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly dabbed at them with a tissue. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's been hard, but Rodney and I have tried to move on. It's just, there's still this emptiness." Sade nodded, her expression one of understanding. "I know that emptiness well," she said. "I was barren for over 6 years. My husband and I tried everything, but nothing worked. It was only when I returned to Nigeria and visited a prophet that things changed." Cynthia's interest was piqued. "A prophetess?" "Yes," Sade replied, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "A river priestess, actually. She performed a ritual on me, and not long after I conceived twins. It was a miracle, Cynthia. The spirits of the water answered my prayers." "But do such things really exist? It sounds too superstitious," Cynthia said with doubt on her face. "Jamie and John, do they look superstitious to you? I would still be barren if not for what the prophetess did on me," Sade said in a very low tone. "But what did she do?" Cynthia asked curiously. "That is not for me to tell you. Until you get there, then she will know what you need to conceive. But what I'm certain of is that you will not leave there disappointed," Sade said confidently. Cynthia listened intently, a flicker of hope sparking in her heart. The idea was crazy, she knew. Rodney would never approve of such a thing, but the thought of finally becoming a mother was too powerful to ignore. Do you think she could help me?" Cynthia asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "I believe she could," Sade said with a reassuring smile. "But you must understand, this is not something to be taken lightly. The ritual is powerful. The spirits require a great deal in return, and you must never mention it to anyone, not even Rodney." Cynthia nodded, the flicker of hope now aflame. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "Anything to have a child." And so, a plan was set in motion. Cynthia, under the guise of attending a charity event in Nigeria with Sade, would travel to the river priestess in Lagos. It was a secret she would keep from Rodney, knowing that he would never sanction such a thing. But in her heart, Cynthia believed that this was her last chance. A chance to finally fill the void that had haunted her for so long.